An elderly woman, kneeling on the cold floor with two babies tied to her back, fights through the pain as she cleans a bathroom. The humiliation coming from her own daughter-in-law echoes like a silent daily punishment. But everything changes when her son walks in and finally sees the truth that had always been right before his eyes. If this story has interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you are watching us from. Let's continue. I promise you, this is going to be the best story you will ever listen to. The sun had not yet fully risen over the upscale neighbourhood of Kensington in London when Mrs. Helen woke up with an aching body. At 68 years old, every movement was a reminder that time was unforgiving. But that morning, the pain seemed more intense, deeper. She slowly got up from the small bed in the back room of the mansion, that space once designated for staff, and which was now her refuge, or rather her silent prison. The house was enormous, with 3 floors, a heated pool, a garden with imported plants, and decor that seemed to have come straight from the pages of a luxury magazine. Everything there exuded opulence and good taste, except for the little corner where Mrs. Helen slept. The room was simple, with old furniture she had brought herself from her previous home, before selling everything to help her son invest in the business that would make him a successful entrepreneur. She looked at the clock on the wall, 5:30 in the morning. She had only 30 minutes before Felicity woke up and started the endless list of tasks Mrs. Helen was expected to complete that day. Her daughter-in-law always woke up early, not out of necessity, but from a peculiar pleasure in supervising her mother-in-law's every move, ensuring nothing was out of place in her realm of artificial perfection. Mrs. Helen walked to the hallway bathroom, stepping carefully to avoid making noise. The marble floor was freezing under her bare feet, and she felt a shiver run up her spine. She quickly looked at herself in the mirror and saw the reflection of a tired woman, with deep dark circles under her eyes and disheveled grey hair. Where was that vibrant Helen who danced folk music on Sundays, who laughed loudly at family gatherings, who raised her son alone after her husband left her? That woman seemed to have disappeared, swallowed by the cold walls of that mansion. She returned to her room and put on a simple set of trousers and a blouse, comfortable clothes for the heavy work that awaited her. As she opened the door, she almost tripped over the baby stroller leaning against the hallway wall. Inside, the twins slept peacefully, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding in that house. Michael and Hannah were only 8 months old, 2 beautiful babies with pink cheeks and easy smiles, whom Mrs. Helen loved with all the intensity her tired heart could still muster. She carefully pushed the stroller to the kitchen, the only place in the house where she felt minimally at ease. There, among the pots and utensils, she could pretend for a few minutes that she was just preparing breakfast for her family, as she used to do, in her simple little house in Clapham. But the reality was quite different. She wasn't preparing coffee out of love or by her own will. She was following orders. The digital clock on the microwave marked 6 o'clock when she heard the first footsteps upstairs. Felicity was waking up. Mrs. Helen felt her stomach clench, that familiar feeling of anxiety that accompanied her every day. Quickly, she began to prepare the special coffee her daughter-in-law liked, the imported one that cost a fortune and had a specific brewing ritual. She put the water to boil, measured exactly 18 grams of powder, adjusted the temperature, timed the extraction. Everything had to be perfect or Felicity would complain, and when Felicity complained, the day became even harder. The babies started to stir in the stroller, and Mrs. Helen knew that in a few minutes they would wake up crying from hunger. She picked up the bottles she had prepared the night before, warmed them in a bain-marie to the exact temperature, and tested them on her wrist. Perfect. As soon as the little ones opened their eyes, she was already there with their food, comforting them with affectionate whispers as they eagerly drank. It was at that moment that Felicity entered the kitchen. She wore a white silk robe, her hair tied in an impeccable bun, her skin perfectly hydrated, and an expression of superiority that seemed to be her trademark. At 32, Felicity was the type of woman who attracted attention wherever she went. Tall, slender, with delicate features and a walk that exuded excessive confidence. She had won over Ryan, Mrs. Helen's son, 5 years ago at a business party in Shoreditch, and since then had transformed the family's life into something unrecognizable. "Good morning, Helen," Felicity said, without even looking at her mother-in-law. "Is the coffee ready?" "Yes, it is, my dear, just the way you like it," Mrs. Helen replied, forcing a smile as she poured the drink into the French porcelain cup that Felicity insisted on using every morning. Felicity took the cup, took a long sip, and made an almost imperceptible grimace. "It's a bit strong today. Next time, use 17 grams, not 18. Mrs. Helen felt her cheeks burn with shame, but merely nodded. "All right, my dear. I apologize. And the babies? Have they eaten?" "They just finished eating. They're quiet." Felicity looked at the twins with superficial affection, the kind of fondness that seemed more for a magazine photo than genuine feeling. She approached the stroller, adjusted their blankets, and then turned to Mrs. Helen with a calculating look. "Today you'll need to get a lot done. I have a photo shoot at 10 for my decor profile, and the house needs to be impeccable. I want you to clean the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, and especially the master suite bathroom. That spot behind the toilet has a little stain that bothers me." Mrs. Helen swallowed hard. The master suite was on. The third floor, and climbing all those stairs with aching knees was torture. But she said nothing. She just nodded, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. "And the babies will be with you the whole time. I can't have interruptions during the photo shoot. You know how important it is for me to maintain my social media image. But Felicity, I don't know if I can carry both of them in the carrier up the stairs. My back has been hurting so much these past few days." Felicity rolled her eyes as if she were hearing the lamest excuse in the world. "Everyone has pain, Helen. The difference is that some people choose to be strong and others choose to be a burden. Do you want to be a burden to your son?" The question was like a punch to the stomach. Mrs. Helen felt her legs weaken, but she held onto the kitchen counter. "No, of course not. I'll manage." "Excellent. Then I don't want to hear any more complaints. Oh, and when you're done upstairs, I need you to iron all of Ryan's clothes. He has an important meeting tomorrow, and the blue shirt he likes is wrinkled." Felicity left the kitchen without waiting for a reply, leaving behind only the scent of expensive perfume and a feeling of humiliation that Mrs. Helen knew all too well. The elderly woman stood there for a few seconds, taking deep breaths, trying to gather strength to start another day of exhausting work. She looked at the babies, who watched her with those curious and innocent eyes, and felt her heart clench. How could she explain to those children, when they grew up, that their grandmother had become a servant in her own family? She tied the double baby carrier on her back with difficulty, adjusted the babies inside it, and slowly began to climb the stairs. Each step was torture, each movement a reminder that her body was no longer prepared for that kind of effort. Michael started to cry, uncomfortable with the position, and Hannah soon joined him. Their crying echoed throughout the house, but Mrs. Helen couldn't stop. She had a mission to fulfill, or rather, an order to obey. When she finally reached the third floor, she was sweating and out of breath. She leaned against the wall for a moment, trying to catch her breath, while the babies continued to cry loudly. She entered the master suite bathroom, a luxurious space with a whirlpool tub, glass shower, Italian marble on the walls, and golden faucets. It was the kind of bathroom many people dreamed of having, but for Mrs. Helen it was just another place that needed to be cleaned until it shone. She knelt on the cold floor, feeling the sharp pain in her knees, and began to scrub the corner behind the toilet, exactly where Felicity had complained about the small stain. The cleaning product had a strong smell that stung her eyes and throat, but she continued moving the sponge in repetitive circles, trying to ignore the weight of the babies on her back and the tears that began to fall uncontrollably. The hours passed slowly that Tuesday morning. Mrs. Helen had finished cleaning the master suite bathroom, but her knees throbbed with pain and her arms trembled with fatigue. The babies had finally stopped crying and slept restlessly on her back, their weight pressing even more on her already fragile spine. She descended the stairs with extra caution, holding onto the railing, silently praying not to trip and hurt the little ones. In the living room, Felicity's photography team was already setting up their equipment. There were 3 young people, all dressed in black, talking in technical terms about light, angles, and composition. Felicity was at the center of it all, posing next to a vase of white flowers that cost more than Mrs. Helen's pension income for 6 months. Her daughter-in-law wore an elegant beige dress, her hair loose in perfect waves, and smiled for the camera with that artificial smile she mastered so well. "Helen, can you be quiet? The babies are making noise and it's disrupting the session," Felicity said, without taking her eyes off the camera. Mrs. Helen felt the humiliation burn in her veins, but merely nodded and quickly left the room, heading for the kitchen, where she could be away from judging eyes. She sat on a stool in the corner, finally taking the baby carrier off her back and placing the babies in the stroller. Her shoulders ached as if they had been beaten, and she massaged the area with trembling hands, trying to relieve the tension. It was at that moment that she overheard a conversation coming from the living room. The voices were low, but the silence of the house allowed her to catch some scattered words. It was Felicity talking to the photographer. "It's incredible how you managed to keep everything so perfect, Felicity. The house, the babies, your figure. How do you do it?" the photographer asked admiringly. Felicity laughed, that rehearsed laugh she used for the cameras. "Organization and discipline, and a little extra help, of course. I have someone who takes care of everything for me." Mrs. Helen felt her stomach churn. Someone who takes care of everything. That was how Felicity referred to her when in front of other people. Not as her mother-in-law, not as her husband's mother, but as an invisible employee, a disposable cog in the machinery of that life of appearances. Memories began to flood Mrs. Helen's mind like violent waves. She remembered when she first met Felicity 5 years ago. Ryan was so in love, so enchanted with that beautiful and sophisticated woman who seemed to have stepped out of a fairy tale. At the time, Mrs. Helen still lived in her little house in Clapham, a simple but cozy place where she had raised her son with so much love after. Her husband abandoned them when Ryan was just 7 years old. Ryan had built his technology company from scratch, working day and night, and Mrs. Helen had sold the only valuable thing she owned, a small apartment she had inherited from her mother, to invest in her son's dream. The money had been crucial for the company to take off, and in a few years Ryan became a successful entrepreneur, respected in the market and financially stable. That's when Felicity appeared. She came from a traditional London family, had attended expensive private schools and had that air of superiority that only those who have never had to fight for survival can possess. At first she was kind to Mrs. Helen, or at least pretended to be. She smiled, asked polite questions about her mother-in-law's life, praised the food she prepared. But everything changed after the wedding. The transformation was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. Felicity began to suggest that the little house in Clapham was too small for Mrs. Helen, that she would be better off living with them in the new mansion they were building in Kensington. Ryan, always busy with work, immediately agreed, thinking it was a great idea to have his mother nearby, especially after Felicity became pregnant with the twins. Mrs. Helen accepted, innocent and hopeful that she could help with her grandchildren and be closer to her son. She sold her little house, donated most of her furniture, and moved into the mansion with only a few bags of clothes and personal belongings. At first, everything seemed fine. She had her own room, helped with the house voluntarily, and spent quality time with Ryan. But as soon as the twins were born, Felicity's mask completely dropped. Gentle suggestions turned into direct orders. Requests for help became demands, and what was supposed to be a harmonious family coexistence transformed into a forced labor regime disguised as family collaboration. Felicity had a special talent for manipulating situations. Whenever Ryan was around, she was sweet and attentive to Mrs. Helen, praised her mother-in-law's work, said how grateful she was to have such dedicated help. But as soon as Ryan left for work, the real Felicity appeared. Sweet words turned into acidic criticisms, compliments gave way to veiled humiliations, and respect disappeared completely. And Mrs. Helen endured everything in silence. She endured because she loved her son, and didn't want to destroy his marriage. She endured because she had nowhere to go after all. She had sold everything to be there. She endured because, deep down, she still hoped that things would improve, that Felicity would change, that Ryan would finally see what was happening right under his nose. The sound of footsteps brought her back to the present. Felicity entered the kitchen with her cell phone in hand, typing furiously. She didn't even look at Mrs. Helen. "The session is over. Now I need you to prepare lunch. Camilla is coming at 2 in the afternoon, so make that quinoa salad with grilled vegetables she likes. And no too much seasoning. You know she's vegetarian and hates salt." Mrs. Helen nodded. "I'll prepare it. And after lunch, you need to wash all the dishes by hand. The machine is making a strange noise, and I don't want to risk breaking the porcelain pieces." "But Felicity, I still need to iron Ryan's clothes and take care of the babies." Felicity finally looked at her, with that cold gaze that made Mrs. Helen feel smaller than an insect. "Then you'll have to organize yourself better. It's not my problem if you can't handle your responsibilities." "My responsibilities?" The words echoed in Mrs. Helen's mind like a silent scream. When exactly had taking care of a house that wasn't hers, of babies who were her grandchildren, but whom she treated as if she were a nanny, of clothes for a son who barely spoke to her, become her responsibilities? When had she accepted this role of servant in her own family? The afternoon passed in a blur of activities. Mrs. Helen prepared the salad, served Felicity and her friend Camilla, washed the dishes, ironed the clothes, took care of the babies, cleaned the living room again after the visitors left. Her feet were swollen, her hands full of wounds from the cleaning products, and her soul was exhausted from so much silence. When the clock struck 7 in the evening, she heard the sound of Ryan's car entering the garage. Her heart leaped with hope. Perhaps today he would stay home for dinner. Perhaps they could talk a little. Perhaps she could feel, even for a few minutes, that she was still important in her son's life. Ryan entered through the kitchen door where Mrs. Helen was preparing dinner. He was 41, tall like his father, but he had her eyes, those brown eyes that sparkled when he smiled. He was wearing an impeccable grey suit, his tie slightly loosened after a long day at work. "Hi, Mum," he said, giving her a quick kiss on the forehead. "Smells good. What are you making?" "Beef stroganoff, your favorite." He smiled, but it was a tired, distant smile. "That's great. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay for dinner tonight. I have a work engagement." "Again, Ryan? You've barely been home in weeks." He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "I know, Mum, but the company is in an expansion phase and I need to be present. You understand, right?" Of course she understood. She always understood. It was what she did best, understand and accept, even when her heart cried out for attention, for a hug, for a real conversation with the son she had raised alone. Felicity appeared at the kitchen door, already dressed to go out, in an elegant black dress and high heels. "Darling, are you ready? We can't be late." Ryan looked at his wife with an affection he hadn't shown his mother in a long time. "Yes, I am. Let's go." "And the babies?" Mrs. Helen asked, already knowing the answer. "They're sleeping. You can keep an eye on them, can't you, Helen?" Felicity said with that tone that wasn't quite a request, but a disguised order. The house fell silent after Ryan and Felicity left. Mrs. Helen served herself a small portion of the stroganoff she had prepared, but could barely eat. The food seemed to have lost its flavor, just like everything in her life lately. She chewed mechanically, looking at the large empty dining room table, remembering how she had dreamed that house would be full of laughter, family gatherings, happy moments with her son and grandchildren. After washing the dinner dishes, she went to check on the babies. Michael and Hannah slept soundly in their cribs in the forest-themed room, with wallpaper full of animals and colorful mobiles gently spinning above them. Mrs. Helen stood there for a few minutes, watching those angelic faces, feeling a deep love mixed with a sadness she couldn't name. They were her grandchildren, extensions of the son she loved so much, but at the same time they were the reason she had become a shadow of herself. Felicity used the babies as an excuse for everything, for every absurd order, for every humiliation disguised as a request for help. And Mrs. Helen accepted, because she thought she was doing what was best for the children, that her sacrifice was worth it if the little ones grew up in a harmonious environment. But was that truly harmony, or just a carefully constructed illusion? She returned to her small room in the back of the house, that tiny space that barely fit a bed and a wardrobe. She sat on the edge of the bed, and picked up the framed photograph she kept on the bedside table. It was an old photo, faded by time, where she appeared young and smiling, holding a 5-year-old Ryan in her lap. They were in a park on a sunny day, and both looked genuinely happy despite all the financial difficulties they faced at the time. Tears began to fall uncontrollably. Tears of exhaustion, of loneliness, of regret for not having spoken up sooner, for having let the situation reach that point. She had become invisible in her own family, a convenient presence who performed tasks but had no voice, no will, no value beyond the utility she represented. How much longer could she endure living like this? Meanwhile, across the city, in an elegant restaurant in Mayfair, Ryan was seated at a table with Felicity and 3 other couples of business friends. The conversation revolved around business, investments, and the latest market news. Ryan participated actively, but his mind was partly elsewhere. In recent days, something had been bothering him, a strange feeling he couldn't identify. His mother seemed quieter than usual, more subdued. He tried to remember the last time they had truly talked, about her life, about how she was feeling, about her dreams and plans. And he couldn't remember. When had he stopped asking? When had their conversations been reduced to quick greetings and superficial exchanges of information? "Darling, are you all right?" Felicity asked, lightly touching his arm. "You seem distant." Ryan blinked, returning to reality. "Yes, I'm just tired. It was a long day." Felicity smiled at him, but it was that smile that didn't reach her eyes, that smile she used as a mask in public. She turned to her friends and began to talk about the renovation she was planning for the mansion's outdoor area, about the famous landscape designers she had consulted, about how much it would cost to have a winter garden with exotic plants. Ryan watched his wife talk with such animation about material things, and for the first time in a long time, he wondered if he truly knew the woman he had married. She had always been focused on status and appearances, but before, it hadn't bothered him so much. He attributed it to her upbringing, the environment she grew up in, the social pressure women like her faced. But lately, something about her bothered him, a coldness that seemed to be intensifying. The night continued, and when they finally returned home near midnight, Ryan was exhausted. He silently entered through the front door. Felicity immediately went upstairs to their room, but something made him stop in the middle of the hallway. He heard a low sound coming from the back of the house. It sounded like muffled crying. Curious and worried, Ryan walked in the direction of the sound. It was his mother's room. The door was ajar, and through the gap he could see Mrs. Helen sitting on the bed holding the old photograph and crying softly, trying not to make a sound. She held a rosary in her other hand and prayed between sobs. "My God, give me strength to continue. Help me to be strong for another day. Don't let me be a burden to my son. Please, help me." Ryan felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. He stood there, frozen, watching his mother's suffering without knowing what to do. Part of him wanted to go in and hug her, ask what was wrong, but another part, a cowardly part he didn't want to admit existed, made him retreat. He wasn't ready to face that pain, wasn't ready for the answers she might give. So, silently, he walked back down the hallway and went up to his room. He lay down beside Felicity, who was already fast asleep, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. His mother's muffled crying echoed in his mind like a ghost that refused to leave. The following days were strange. Ryan began to pay more attention to the small things when he was home. He noticed that his mother seemed to walk with difficulty, that she was always busy with some task, that Felicity gave her orders with a disturbing naturalness. But whenever he tried to talk to Mrs. Helen alone, she would change the subject, smile forcedly, and say that everything was fine. It was on a Thursday, when Ryan decided to leave the office early, that things truly began to change. He arrived home around 3 in the afternoon, an unusual time for him. The house was silent, but he heard voices coming from upstairs. He climbed the stairs silently, not knowing exactly why he was being discreet. Perhaps by instinct, perhaps because something in the tone of those voices alerted him. It was Felicity and Mrs. Helen. They were in the baby's room, and Ryan stood in the hallway, hidden behind the wall, listening. "How long did you leave Michael with a dirty diaper, Helen? Look how irritated his skin is." Felicity's voice was harsh, accusatory. "I changed it an hour ago, my dear. He must have just done it now." "Don't give me excuses. You're becoming negligent. I give you a roof over your head, food, everything of the best, and you can't even properly take care of your own grandchildren." Ryan felt anger beginning to boil within him. Her own grandchildren? Felicity was speaking as if his mother was an incompetent employee, not a family member. "I do my best, Felicity. I'm very tired today. My legs are swollen and—" "Tired? Everyone gets tired, Helen. The difference is that some of us are strong enough not to complain. Do you want to be seen as weak? Do you want Ryan to know that his own mother can't handle taking care of his house?" "No, of course not. I don't want to be a burden." "Then prove it. Tonight we're having important visitors. Business friends of Ryan's. I need the house to be perfect. And that includes you cleaning that bathroom again. The way you cleaned it last week wasn't good enough." Ryan couldn't take it anymore. He stormed into the room like a hurricane, the door slamming against the wall. Felicity jumped, startled, and Mrs. Helen's eyes widened in surprise and fear. "What's going on here?" Ryan asked, his voice laden with a contained anger he rarely showed. The silence that followed Ryan's entrance into the room was deafening. Felicity paled for an instant, but quickly recomposed her expression, putting on that mask of a dedicated wife she wore so well. Mrs. Helen, on the other hand, seemed to have shrunk even further, her shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. "Ryan, darling, you startled me," Felicity said, forcing a nervous laugh. "I didn't hear you come in. What are you doing home so early?" "I asked a question, Felicity. What's going on here?" Ryan repeated, completely ignoring his wife's attempt to divert the subject. His eyes moved between the two women, trying to understand the scene he had witnessed. "Nothing much, darling. I was just talking to Helen about the preparations for tonight. You know how important these things are, and I just wanted to make sure everything was perfect." "Talking?" Ryan took a step forward, his voice becoming lower, more dangerous. "Because from the hallway, it sounded more like you were humiliating my mother." Felicity opened her mouth in false indignation. "Humiliating? Ryan, how can you say that? I was just being clear about expectations. Your mother understands, doesn't she, Helen?" All heads turned to Mrs. Helen, who stood in the corner of the room like a cornered animal. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her eyes filled with tears, and she clasped her hands together so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Mum," Ryan approached her, his voice softening. "Tell me the truth. What's going on here?" Mrs. Helen hesitated, looking quickly at Felicity and then back at her son. "It's all right, my son. Felicity was just asking for my help with the house, that's all." But the way she looked at him, with those eyes full of fear and pleading, said otherwise. Ryan knew his mother. He knew every expression, every tone of voice, every gesture, and something was very wrong. "Mum, why are your hands full? Of wounds?" he asked suddenly, taking her hands carefully. Her skin was cracked, red, with small cuts that looked painful. "It's from the cleaning products," Mrs. Helen replied quickly. "I have sensitive skin." "Cleaning products?" Ryan felt something twist inside his chest. "Why are you using cleaning products?" Before Mrs. Helen could answer, Felicity intervened with that sweet, melodious voice she used to manipulate situations. "Ryan, your mother likes to help with the house. She always says herself that she can't sit still, that she wants to feel useful. Isn't that right, Helen?" Mrs. Helen nodded mechanically, but her tears began to fall silently. Ryan saw them and felt something break inside him. That wasn't the strong, vibrant mother he knew. That was a broken woman, subdued, silenced. "I need to talk to you, Felicity," Ryan said, his voice tense. "Now, in our room." He left the baby's room without waiting for a reply, and Felicity followed him after giving Mrs. Helen a warning glance. Her mother-in-law stood there, trembling, holding onto Michael's crib to keep from falling. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. Was Ryan finally beginning to see the truth? Or would it just be another argument that would end with Felicity manipulating the situation and her returning to her routine of silence and suffering? In the couple's bedroom, the tension was palpable. Ryan stood by the window, looking out at the garden without really seeing anything. Felicity closed the door behind her and crossed her arms, adopting a defensive posture. "Ryan, I didn't like the tone you used with me in front of your mother. You disrespected me." "I disrespected you?" Ryan turned to face her, his eyes shining with a rage he rarely showed. "Felicity, I heard the way you spoke to my mother. I heard every word. How dare you treat her that way?" Felicity sighed dramatically. "You don't understand, darling. Your mother is very sensitive. I was just being firm because she has been neglecting some responsibilities." "Responsibilities?" Ryan gave a bitter laugh. "What responsibilities, Felicity? She is my mother, not a maid. But she insists on helping. I can't forbid her from doing what she wants, can I? The way you were talking to her didn't sound like someone accepting voluntary help. It sounded like an abusive boss mistreating an employee." Felicity felt the ground begin to slip from under her feet. She needed to regain control of the situation, and fast. She changed her expression to one of hurt, letting her eyes glisten with unshed tears. "Ryan, do you really think I would be capable of mistreating your mother, the mother of the man I love? I'm offended that you would even suggest that. Then explain her hands. Explain why she looked so scared. She has arthritis, Ryan, and she's an elderly woman who sometimes gets confused. Maybe she misinterpreted the tone of my voice. You know how older people can be sensitive." Ryan shook his head, frustrated. There was something wrong with Felicity's explanation, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Perhaps because he had never paid enough attention before, never questioned the dynamics of the house, never stopped to truly observe how his mother was being treated. "I'm going to talk to her," Ryan finally said. "Alone. And I want the truth." "Of course, darling. Talk to her. She'll tell you the same thing I told you. Your mother adores me and values being able to contribute to this house very much." But when Ryan left the room, Felicity stood there, her perfectly composed face transforming into a mask of rage. She picked up her cell phone and typed a quick message. She needed to accelerate her plans. She couldn't allow Ryan to discover the truth, not now that she was so close to securing her position definitively in the family. Ryan went downstairs and found his mother in the kitchen, preparing something on the stove. She moved slowly, as if every movement hurt, and he noticed for the first time in months how thin she had become, how her face was more wrinkled, how she seemed to have aged years in a matter of months. "Mum, can we talk?" Mrs. Helen turned, quickly wiping tears from her face. "Of course, my son. What is it?" Ryan pulled out a chair and sat at the kitchen table, motioning for her to do the same. Mrs. Helen hesitated, looking at the stove. "The food can wait. Sit here with me." She obeyed, sitting on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped in her lap, her body tense, as if expecting a scolding. Ryan observed every detail and felt an overwhelming guilt tighten his chest. "Mum, tell me the truth. Are you happy?" "The truth. Here?" The question caught her by surprise. Mrs. Helen blinked several times, processing the words. "Of course I am, my son. Why do you ask?" "Because I saw you crying in your room the other day. Because your hands are injured. Because you seem—" He paused, searching for the right words. "You seem subdued, as if you've lost that light you always had." Tears returned to Mrs. Helen's eyes, but she fought to keep them under control. "I'm getting old, Ryan. It's natural to be more tired, quieter. I'm not talking about age, Mum. I'm talking about happiness. When was the last time you did something you really wanted to do? When was the last time you went out with friends, went to the cinema, visited church, did anything that wasn't working in this house?" Mrs. Helen opened her mouth to answer, but couldn't, because the truth was she couldn't remember. She couldn't remember the last time she had done something for pleasure, the last time she had felt free, the last time her life had been hers and not an extension of other people's needs. The silence between mother and son stretched for long seconds. Mrs. Helen looked at her own injured hands, unable to find the right words. Part of her wanted to scream the truth, to tell about every humiliation, every absurd order, every moment she felt less than human. But another part, the part that had been conditioned by fear and manipulation, prevented her from speaking. "My son," she began with a trembling voice, "I only want the best for you. I want you to be happy with Felicity, to have a united family. If I'm here helping, it's because I want to be part of this family. But you are part of this family, Mum. What? You always have been. Ryan took her hands carefully, avoiding the wounds. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You are my mother. That is more than enough. Tears finally overflowed from Mrs. Helen's eyes. She tried to pull her hands back, but Ryan held them firmly, gently. Tell me what's happening, please. I need to know. And then, like a dam that finally breaks, the words began to pour out, slowly at first, hesitantly, but then in a continuous stream of painful confessions. Mrs. Helen told about the daily orders, about how Felicity treated her when he wasn't, about the cleaning products that burned her skin, about having to carry the babies on her back while cleaning the bathroom, about the overwhelming loneliness she felt even while surrounded by family. She spoke about how she had sold everything to be there, how she had nowhere to go, how she was afraid of destroying his marriage if she spoke the truth. She spoke about the nights she cried silently in her small room, praying for strength to endure another day. Ryan listened to everything, his face growing paler and paler, anger and guilt mixing into an overwhelming emotion. How had he not seen? How had he been so blind, so absorbed in his own work, so manipulated by his wife that he hadn't noticed his own mother's suffering? Mum, He swallowed hard, fighting back his own tears. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I didn't want you to know, Mrs. Helen whispered. I didn't want to be a burden. You were never a burden. Never. Ryan pulled his mother into a hug, something he hadn't done in months, perhaps years. He felt how thin, how fragile she was, and the guilt hit him like a punch. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not seeing, for not protecting you. They stayed like that for several minutes, in the silence of the kitchen, as years of pain and silence finally began to dissipate. When they separated, Ryan had a new determination in his eyes. Things are going to change, Mum. From now on, everything will change. But before they could continue the conversation, they heard the front door open. Multiple voices echoed down the hallway. Ryan looked at the clock and cursed softly. The business dinner. He had completely forgotten. Felicity appeared at the kitchen door, impeccably, dressed in a navy blue ball gown, her hair in an elegant bun, her makeup perfect. Behind her came 3 couples, all elegantly dressed, all smiling and chatting animatedly. Ryan, darling, our guests have arrived, Felicity said with that sweet voice she used in public, but her eyes shot a clear warning to Mrs. Helen. Has your mother prepared everything? Ryan stood up, placing himself between Felicity and Mrs. Helen. My mother will not be serving anyone tonight. Felicity's smile wavered for a fraction of a second. What do you mean? You heard me. My mother is a guest in this house, not an employee. But Ryan, she herself offered to help, Felicity tried to argue, maintaining her forced smile while looking nervously at the guests who watched the scene with growing curiosity. No, she didn't offer. You forced her. And that ends now. The tension in the kitchen was palpable. The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, not knowing whether to stay or leave. Felicity felt control of the situation slipping through her fingers, and panic began to show in her perfectly made-up eyes. Ryan, can we discuss this later? We have guests, she said through clenched teeth. No, we'll discuss this now, in front of everyone if necessary. Felicity tried to touch his arm, but Ryan pulled away. Darling, you're being irrational. Your mother is confused. She already told you she likes to help. Stop lying, Felicity. Stop manipulating the situation. I know everything now. That's when one of the guests, Marcia, a middle-aged woman with short hair and a firm expression, stepped forward. Excuse me for intruding, but I've needed to say something about this for weeks. All eyes turned to her. Felicity paled. I come here frequently for the charity lunches Felicity organizes, Marcia continued. And I've seen many times how she treats Mrs. Helen. She pointed to Mrs. Helen. I've seen how she gives orders, how she talks to her as if she were a maid. It bothered me, but I thought it wasn't my place to interfere. That's not true, Felicity tried to protest, but her voice sounded weak, desperate. It is too, said another guest, Patricia, a young woman with glasses. I noticed it too, and it wasn't just once. Ryan looked at his wife with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. How many people knew? How many people had seen what he, blinded by work and trust, had failed to see? Felicity, realizing she was completely losing control, changed tactics. Tears began to stream down her perfectly made-up face. Ryan, I just wanted a perfect home for you. I wanted everything to run smoothly. Your mother seemed so willing to help, and I thought we were just sharing responsibilities. Sharing responsibilities? Ryan gave a bitter laugh. You made her carry babies on her back while cleaning bathrooms. You burned her hands with chemicals. You humiliated her, treated her like trash, and still have the nerve to call that sharing responsibilities. I never meant to. Hurt her, I swear. But you did hurt her. And worse, you enjoyed it. You enjoyed having someone you could control, someone you could order around, someone who was dependent on you. The silence that followed was awkward. The guests didn't know where to look. Mrs. Helen sat in the chair, crying silently, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. Finally, someone was defending her. Finally, the truth was coming out. Felicity tried to approach Ryan once more, but he raised his hand, keeping her at a distance. I want you out of this house. Now. What? But Ryan, the babies. The babies will stay with me, and with their grandmother, who will care for them out of love, not out of obligation or manipulation. You can't kick me out of my own house. This house is in my name, Felicity, and at this moment you are no longer welcome here. Felicity looked around seeking support, but found only looks of disapproval and discomfort. She realized she had lost, that her carefully constructed facade had completely crumbled. With a cry of frustration and anger, she grabbed her purse from the kitchen counter and ran. Out, her high heels echoing down the hallway until the front door slammed shut. The guests began to quickly say their goodbyes, murmuring apologies and promising to call later. In a few minutes, the house returned to silence. Ryan knelt beside his mother, holding her injured hands with all the care in the world. It's over, Mum, it's over. You'll never go through this again, I promise. Mrs. Helen held her son's face with trembling hands. My son, I'm scared. What if she comes back? What if you change your mind? I won't change my mind. I was blind, but now I see. And I will spend the rest of my life making up for the time I failed you. And the babies and the marriage? We'll figure it out together. But one thing I know for sure, you are my priority now. You and the children. And we will build a real family based on respect and love, not on appearances and manipulation. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and changes. Ryan hired a lawyer specializing in family law, Dr. Beatrice Allen, a competent and straightforward woman who listened to the entire story attentively and promised to do everything in her power to protect Mrs. Helen and secure custody of the babies for Ryan. The first thing they did was take Mrs. Helen to a doctor. The examinations revealed what her body already knew: dehydration, vitamin deficiency, arthritis, aggravated by excessive exertion, knee and spinal injuries caused by heavy work unsuitable for someone her age. The doctor was shocked by the patient's health condition and did not hesitate to document everything in detail, creating a report that would be essential for the legal process. Ryan transformed the old office in the house, a spacious and well-lit room, on the second floor into Mrs. Helen's new bedroom. He bought comfortable furniture, a new orthopedic bed, beautiful curtains that she herself chose. For the first time in years, she had a voice in decisions about her own space. Mum, this room is yours. Decorate it however you want. And I don't want you doing anything else besides resting and recovering, Ryan said, as he helped organize her things in the new space. But what about the babies? And the house? Who will take care of everything? Mrs. Helen asked, still conditioned to think that her worth was tied to usefulness. I hired a professional nanny and a housekeeper. 2 people, Mum, because it was work for 2 people, not for an elderly woman with health problems. And you're going to be a grandmother, not an employee. You'll play with the babies when you want. You'll cuddle them, you'll tell stories. But you won't carry heavy things, you won't clean bathrooms, you won't do anything else that hurts you. Tears streamed down Mrs. Helen's face, but this time they were tears of gratitude. I don't even know how to thank you. You don't have to thank me, I'm the one who has to apologize every day for the rest of my life. for not seeing what was happening right under my nose. Meanwhile, Felicity did not remain silent. She hired a lawyer and began a battle for custody of the twins, claiming that Ryan was being manipulated by his mother and that she, as the biological mother, had a right to her children. The hearings were tense and painful. Felicity cried copiously before the judge, painted herself as a victim of a family that never accepted her, alleged that Mrs. Helen was jealous of her and had manipulated Ryan against her. But truth has a way of revealing itself. The witnesses who were present on that fateful dinner night were called to testify. Marcia and Patricia recounted what they had witnessed over the months. The previous housekeeper, who had been fired by Felicity months ago, voluntarily came forward to tell how Felicity treated Mrs. Helen, confirming everything that had been revealed. The decisive moment came when Dr. Beatrice presented the house's security camera recordings to the judge. Ryan didn't even know the security system recorded audio, but when the lawyer requested the footage, they discovered hours and hours of evidence. Felicity's voice humiliating Mrs. Helen, giving absurd orders, making cruel comments. Everything was documented. When the recordings were played in the courtroom, Felicity paled. Her lawyer tried to argue that the recordings had been edited, that they were out of context, but it was useless. The truth was there, clear and unquestionable, recorded in audio and video. The judge, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, listened to everything attentively. When it was time to give his preliminary verdict on provisional custody, he did not hesitate. Ms. Felicity Costa Allen, what these recordings reveal is a systematic pattern of psychological abuse and exploitation of an elderly and vulnerable person. Regardless of the marital situation, this behavior is unacceptable and raises serious questions about your ability to provide a healthy environment for the children. Provisional custody is granted to the father, Mr. Ryan Allen, pending further investigation. Felicity left the courtroom furious, shouting threats and accusations, but no one was listening to her anymore. Her mask had completely fallen, and the woman revealed beneath it was not at all pretty. Back at the Kensington mansion, life began to find a new rhythm. Ryan reduced his working hours, delegated more responsibilities to his partners, and became more present at home. He woke up early to have breakfast with his mother, helped with the babies, and for the first time in years, genuinely talked with Mrs. Helen about her life, her dreams, her fears, her hopes. The nanny he hired, Lucy, was an experienced and kind 50-year-old woman who treated Mrs. Helen with the respect she deserved. The two quickly became friends, and Lucy frequently encouraged Mrs. Helen to go out, visit old friends, and live her own life. One day Ryan came home and found his mother laughing in the living room. With 3 ladies her age, they were having coffee and cake, chatting animatedly about old times. The sound of that laughter, genuine and free, made Ryan's heart clench with emotion. How long had it been since he heard his mother laugh like that? "Mum, can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked after her friends left. "Of course, my son." "Sit here," Mrs. Helen said, patting the sofa beside her. Ryan sat down and remained silent for a moment, organizing his thoughts. "I wanted to ask you an important question, and I want you to be completely honest. With me. You can ask. Do you forgive me? For what happened? For me being so blind, so absent, so negligent towards you?" Mrs. Helen took her son's hands, those hands that were now being treated and beginning to heal. "My son, I never blamed you for anything. You were manipulated just like me. The difference is that you had the power to change the situation when you discovered the truth, and that's exactly what you did. But I should have seen it sooner. I should have paid attention. Perhaps, but you did eventually see it, and that's what matters. And now we are here, rebuilding our relationship, rebuilding our family. That is worth more than any regret." Ryan hugged his mother, feeling grateful for a second chance to be the son she deserved. "I promise I will be better. I promise I will be present, that I will listen to you, that I will never again let anyone treat you badly. I know, my son. I know." That night, as Ryan put the twins to sleep, he looked at their innocent faces and made a silent promise. He would raise those children with different values than he had shown in recent years. He would teach them about respect, about empathy, about the importance of valuing people for who they are, not for what they do for you. He would teach them that family is not about appearances or status, but about love, support, and genuine presence. In the following months, the divorce process moved forward. Felicity tried several different tactics, from threats to attempts at reconciliation, but Ryan remained firm. Dr. Beatrice Allen was relentless in protecting Ryan's and the children's interests, and it gradually became clear that Felicity would not get the custody she so desperately sought. The final turning point came when a former employee of Felicity's family came forward with bombshell information. Felicity had a history of treating employees abusively since she was young. There were reports from other people who had worked for her family and had gone through similar situations. The pattern of behavior was clear and long-standing. Faced with so much evidence, Felicity finally accepted a settlement. She would have the right to supervised bi-weekly visits with the babies, but custody would remain with Ryan. In addition, she would have to pay compensation to Mrs. Helen for the psychological and physical damage caused, as well as undergo mandatory psychological counseling. When the final judgment was delivered, Mrs. Helen was in the courtroom audience. She felt no joy at Felicity's downfall, only a deep relief that that painful chapter was finally closing. As she left the courthouse, she took a deep breath of the fresh London air and felt as if she was breathing for the first time in years. "It's over, Mum. It's really over," Ryan said, putting his arm around her shoulders. "It's over," she repeated, and for the first time in a long time she fully believed those words. 6 months had passed since that fateful day when the truth finally came to light. The Kensington mansion, once a stage of oppression disguised as perfection, now breathed real life. The walls that had witnessed so much silent suffering now echoed with genuine laughter, warm conversations, and the happy noise of 2 children growing up in an environment of true love. Mrs. Helen woke up that Saturday morning feeling rested for the first time in years. Her room, now spacious and decorated with her own choices, had a large window that let the morning sun stream in gently. She stretched in the comfortable bed without the sharp back pain that had accompanied her every morning in the past. The medical treatment, adequate rest, and especially the absence of forced labor had done wonders for her health. She slowly got up, put on a soft bathrobe, and went down to the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee and toasted bread greeted her, and she found Ryan already awake, preparing breakfast. He wore a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair messy, and had a smile on his face as he tried to balance a tray with cups and plates. "Good morning, Mum. I was preparing breakfast to bring to your room, but since you've come down, let's have it here in the kitchen," he said, giving her an affectionate kiss on the forehead. "Good morning, my son. You didn't have to do that," Mrs. Helen replied, but her smile showed how much she appreciated the gesture. "I want to. By the way, Lucy is off today, so I'll be taking care of the babies, and you'll have a day all to yourself. Agreed?" "Ryan, I can help." He held his mother's hands gently. "I know you can, but today you're going to do something. Just for you. Your friends called yesterday and invited you for a walk in Hyde Park. You'll go, you'll enjoy the day, and when you come back, I want to hear all the stories." Mrs. Helen felt her eyes fill with tears of gratitude. Each day was new proof that her life had truly changed, that the nightmare was over, and she was living a dream she hadn't dared to imagine before. After breakfast, she calmly got ready, choosing a beautiful outfit that Ryan had insisted on buying for her weeks ago. She looked at herself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman reflected there. Her face had color again, her eyes sparkled, and there was a genuine smile on her lips. She had returned to being Helen, no longer the silent shadow she had become under Felicity's regime. The day at the park with her friends was wonderful. They walked through the gardens, talked about everything and nothing, laughed at old stories, and Mrs. Helen felt as light as she hadn't felt in years. When she returned home in the late afternoon, she found a scene that warmed her heart. Ryan was on the living room rug playing with Michael and Hannah. The babies, now 1 year and 2 months old, crawled and laughed as their father made funny faces and sounds. The house was slightly messy, with toys scattered and cushions out of place, but it was a happy mess, a mess of life being lived, not of appearances being maintained. "Grandma's here," Ryan shouted when he saw his mother. "Hannah, look who's back." Little Hannah turned her head and smiled when she saw her grandmother, extending her arms. Mrs. Helen picked her up, feeling the pleasant weight of the child, but this time without pain, without obligation, just with pure love. "How was your day?" Ryan asked. "It was perfect. Absolutely perfect." That night, after the babies were put to bed, Ryan and Mrs. Helen sat on the house's veranda, drinking tea and watching the stars. There was a peace between them that hadn't existed for years, a re-established connection, stronger for having survived the storm. "Mum, I was thinking," Ryan began, "about how I almost lost you. Not physically, but I lost who you were. And I realized that this happens to many people. People get lost in silence, suffering without speaking, enduring. Abuses because they are afraid or because they think it's their duty. It's true, and sometimes those who should protect are the ones who can't see what's happening. Or don't want to see," Ryan admitted sadly. "I've been thinking a lot about that. About how easy it was for me to believe Felicity's lies, to accept her version of reality, because it was more convenient than questioning, than truly looking. You were busy, my son, and she was very good at manipulating. But it was no excuse. Family should always be a priority, and I failed at that. But you corrected it. When you saw the truth, you acted. That counts for a lot." Ryan took his mother's hand and squeezed it gently. "I promise I will teach this to my children. I will teach them that respect is not optional, that family is not about control or appearances, but about genuine love and mutual care. You will be a wonderful father. You already are." The following weeks brought more positive changes. Ryan enrolled in a support group for children of elderly parents, where he learned about the signs of abuse he had missed and how to create a truly welcoming environment for his mother. Mrs. Helen, in turn, began physiotherapy and participated in activities at the local church, rebuilding her social network and her self-esteem. The issue of the baby's custody was finally definitively resolved. Felicity maintained her bi-weekly supervised visits, but seemed to have lost interest in the children when she realized she could no longer use them as instruments of control. She had moved to Edinburgh, where she began a new life away from the memories of London. One afternoon, while Mrs. Helen played with the twins in the garden, she noticed Michael trying to take his first steps alone. She called Ryan, who came running with his phone to film the moment. Together, grandmother and father watched in wonder as the boy took 3 wobbly steps before falling onto the grass, laughing at his own adventure. "He walked! Our Michael walked!" Ryan exclaimed, picking up his son and spinning him around. Mrs. Helen watched the scene with a full heart. There was her son, present, attentive, celebrating the important milestones in his children's lives. There was the family she had always dreamed of having, built not on false perfection but on true love and genuine presence. That night, before going to sleep, Mrs. Helen wrote in her diary, something she had started doing on the recommendation of the therapist who now accompanied her. She wrote about gratitude, about new beginnings, about how life can surprise even when everything seems lost. She wrote about the importance of speaking the truth, of not accepting abuse in the name of love or family duty. And she wrote, in firm, clear handwriting, something that summarized her journey. "Today, I understood that my worth is not in what I do for others, but in who I am. I am Helen. I'm a mother, I am a grandmother, I am a woman, and that is more than enough." Months turned into years, and the wound left by the period of abuse gradually healed. Mrs. Helen never forgot what she went through, but she learned not to let it define who she was. Ryan became the present son she always deserved, and the twins grew up in an environment of true respect and love. The Kensington mansion ceased to be a showroom of false perfection and transformed into a true home with laughter, mess, love, and presence. And Mrs. Helen, the woman, who almost lost herself in silence, found her voice again and used her story to help other people in similar situations, volunteering at a shelter for elderly victims of family abuse. Life had given her a second chance, and she was determined to seize it fully, proving that it is never too late to start over, to rediscover oneself, to choose happiness over silent suffering. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Mrs. Helen and Ryan has deeply touched your hearts. This narrative reminds us that silence can hide immense pain, and that sometimes those we love most are the ones who most need our attention and protection. If this story resonated with you, if you know someone going through a similar situation, or if you simply appreciated this emotional journey, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Every subscription helps us continue bringing stories that matter, that make you reflect, that transform. Leave a like on the video so more people can learn Helen's story and learn from it. We have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about family, new beginnings, and overcoming adversity. You can find it by clicking here. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the complexity of human relationships, that celebrate the courage to start over, that honor those who find strength to change their lives. Tell us in the comments which part of the story moved you the most. Have you witnessed situations of silent abuse in families? How can we as a society be more attentive to the signs? Your opinion and experience can help others who watch us. Don't miss our next content, full of emotion and important reflections. We are here every day with stories that make a difference. Until next time, and remember, family is about love, respect, and true presence. An affectionate hug to all.